NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar.
Welcome to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, powered by our friends at NC Pork. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of our new Bold North State Football Daily Series. I'm Chris Edwards, so happy to be back with David here in year 3 of the quickly growing North Carolina Sports Network. On this weekly show here in 2025, DG and I are mostly going to look ahead at the upcoming week's college football matchups. We'll also discuss the sport's biggest headlines and take a quick glance back with some of DG's expert analysis on the biggest games and developments in the previous week's schedule. DG, now in his 39th year covering college football, both here in North Carolina and around the Atlantic Coast Conference. And as we jump into this week's matchups, a quick reminder that the pork industry is a huge part of our North Carolina economy, with more than 42,000 jobs and an economic impact of almost $11 billion per year. You can learn more about at ncpork.org. That's NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. DG, how are you, my friend? Great to see you.
It's great to see you, Chris. For the record, you left me for 1 week and 1 week only as you handle some other obligations. No complaints about that, but it coincided with massive chaotic questions around Bill Belichick at UNC, and then questions about whether Penn State's going to try to lure Manny Diaz away from Duke now that the Nittany Lions have fired James Franklin. So, man, you just kind of duck into the other room and all heck breaks loose. So I'm very happy to have you back.
Great to be back, and we're going to restore some order this week, too. The big winners in Week 7 included just 3 fantastic national games that you and Mike Waddell previewed last week. Indiana over Oregon and Alabama over Missouri. Can't forget about Texas's big win over Oklahoma, and a little closer to home. How about Appalachian State, North Carolina Central, Wake Forest, and Western Carolina? That were all huge winners on the gridiron. We'll have more on last week's results a little later in our show today, but let's get right to this week's biggest matchups, beginning with those involving teams here in the Bold North State and continuing on with our 3 top national matchups involving teams that we know very well. This segment brought to you by our great friends at NC by Train. You can skip the traffic, kick back, and enjoy the ride with NC by Train. Whether you're heading to see family, catching a game, or just exploring the Bold North State, Amtrak service makes travel easy and affordable. Book your next ride today at ncbytrain.org and see North Carolina the relaxing way. How about game number 1, DG? Number 12, Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets, a perfect 6-0. They come to Durham to take on 4-2 Duke Saturday at noon. This is on ESPN, and the Blue Devils, believe it or not, a 2-point home favorite at Wallace Wade Stadium.
Yeah, Chris, this is one of the most compelling matchups of the entire college football weekend, I think, for multiple reasons. First, Georgia Tech, as you said, is 6-0 and nationally ranked. Duke, remember, while dealing with a lesser overall record at 4-2, is a perfect 3-0 in conference play. And if you look at the remaining schedules, the winner of this Georgia Tech-Duke matchup, and only the winner of this game, has an obvious and direct and very manageable path to, believe it or not, the ACC football championship game in Charlotte. That would be an enormous first-time accomplishment for either the 4th-year Georgia Tech coach Brent Key or the 2nd-year Duke coach Manny Diaz, just as Diaz's name understandably has popped up in those Penn State coaching conversations after the dismissal of the longtime Nittany Lions leader James Franklin. Remember, Manny Diaz did a fantastic job as Penn State's defensive coordinator during the 2 seasons immediately before he accepted the Duke job. For the record, he is not the number 1 or the number 2 target of that Penn State coaching search, at least at this early stage. Who knows what happens down the road. But secondly, back to Georgia Tech Duke, this game's going to match 2 of the best quarterbacks in the entire ACC. Haynes King of the Yellow Jackets, who's a dual threat nightmare for opposing defenses, and Darian Mensah of the Blue Devils, who's throwing the ball at least as well, if not better than anyone else in this league. We'll talk more about both of those quarterbacks as high-end All-ACC candidates a little bit later in today's show. Neither defense in this game dominates at the line of scrimmage. Well coached, but not overwhelming physical specimens. That means that creating turnovers and getting off the field on third down will be crucial focal points for both sides. Tech's going to try to run the ball with Haynes King on both designed runs and quarterback scrambles. They'll also be trying to run it with their talented 1-2 punch at tailback, where they have a fifth-year senior Jamal Haynes and a Penn transfer, Ivy League, Malachi Hosley, and those guys are all running behind a very strong offensive line. Remember Brent Key, the former Georgia Tech offensive lineman himself. Duke, meanwhile, will try to run a little bit, especially with the blossoming true freshman we've talked about in recent weeks, Nate Shepard at tailback. But the Blue Devils also believe they'll be able to protect Darian Mensah, who has developed great chemistry with his wide receivers, especially the Harvard transfer Cooper Barkate and the former East Forsyth prep star here in North Carolina, Quayshawn Brown. This seems to be an overwhelmingly even matchup in most areas, although I will mention the Yellow Jackets have a significant statistical advantage on special teams, where their junior place kicker Aiden Burr has been almost perfect. Their senior punter, Marshall Nichols, is a UNLV transfer that most people believe will end up punting in the NFL. And the Jackets also have a fifth-year senior punt returner in Eric Rivers, a Florida international transfer. All of those guys have been making some huge, some subtle, but key plays on special teams. So we'll see if that makes the difference in Durham on Saturday afternoon.
All right, what about the Tar Heels of North Carolina, DG? Much speculation, much talk around Bill Belichick's program. Carolina 2-3, getting out of town, heading west to take on 4-2 Cal. This is Friday night, 10:30 Eastern on ESPN. Cal, a 10-point home favorite in Berkeley.
Yeah, you and I talked, or Mike and I guess, talked a little bit about the Bill Belichick factor on last week's show. But the one thing many people forgot or downplayed this past week when the rumors were flying about Bill Belichick's future in Chapel Hill was the money factor. And that is never a good idea to forget that if you're trying to understand or to communicate, as that outstanding book series describes it in some other contexts, how stuff works. Carolina's decision makers insist that they have no desire to fire the six-time Super Bowl champion head coach at this very early stage of his maiden voyage at the college level. But even if they did want to fire Belichick and his staff this year, the price tag would be approximately $30 million. That's $20 million for Belichick's contractual buyout and about $10 million more for everyone else and everything else. For some very important perspective, remember that would be by far, and I've been covering sports in this state for almost 40 years, it would be the largest coaching buyout ever paid by any public university in the great state of North Carolina. And for that reason and others, it is just insanely unlikely to happen during or even after year one. Now, if Bill Belichick wanted to leave, and he did say again this week that that is not the case, he wants to stay in Chapel Hill, he said, that would be one thing because it would be a very uncomplicated departure from a financial perspective. But firing him at this year one stage is just extremely unlikely to happen. Now, regarding the actual game, as the Tar Heels travel about 2,400 miles for a battle that matches what most people call two of the five highest ranked public universities in our country from an academic standpoint, to be candid, neither Carolina nor Cal is a very good football team. Everybody knows that about the Tar Heels, maybe the Bears. The Bears are 4-2, that's true, but it's also true that they've played a weak schedule to this point and that they got absolutely slaughtered by both San Diego State and Duke, the two better opponents on their slate. Now, personnel-wise, Cal is the slightly better team than Carolina, mainly because of the Bears' defense, where they have very good players at linebacker and in the secondary. But both teams have struggled mightily on offense. Under their first-year coordinator, Freddie Kitchens, a guy, remember, who has barely any coordinator or play-calling experience in his entire 27-year career, as we've mentioned previously, the most bizarre hire by Bill Belichick at Carolina. Under Kitchens, Carolina's passing offense, no matter who's at quarterback, has been truly embarrassing. And the Tar Heels simply have done nothing schematically to keep defenses off balance, the way we've seen at other ACC schools. Meanwhile, Cal's offense has a very talented but also very unpredictable true freshman at quarterback. We don't see many true freshman starters at that position in the transfer portal era. His name is Jaron Songupolotele. Somebody's going to have to say that frequently late Friday night. And the Bears have a familiar face at running back in the NC State transfer, Kendrick Raphael, but their sheer talent level at Cal overall should not be enough to push Carolina around the field. To me, the most unpredictable aspect of this game, and maybe the most fascinating aspect as well, will be whether the Tar Heels, through reports, remember, of internal locker room infighting and player division, will they actually play together? Will they actually put forth maximum effort for their coaches, for their fellow teammates? That's a very low bar in the college competitive athletics world, but I don't think there are any safe assumptions surrounding UNC football right now, so that'll be one of the things I'm watching late Friday night.
How about the game on Thursday night, DG, in Greenville? 2-4 Tulsa visiting 3-3 East Carolina. National television window again for the Pirates, 7:30 on ESPN Thursday night. We will, of course, be there with our Old North State tailgate and traveling sports circus to see the Pirates and the Golden Hurricane. It's ECU, DG, that's a 16-point home favorite.
Yeah, shout out to our friends at Pirate Radio, who we've been partners with for decades and will be kind of our host again as we take our tailgate and circus to Greenville on Thursday night. We look forward to seeing everybody in the hours leading up to that 7:30 kickoff at Dowdy-Ficklin. Among the 7 FBS programs here in North Carolina that Chris and I discuss every week, in my opinion, there are only 2 here in mid-October that still could have a special season when you factor in 2 things. One, how are they playing right now, but also who's left on their regular season schedule. One of those squads is Duke, which we discussed a bit ago. The other is, to me, East Carolina. I know the Pirates are only 3-3 right now, but they're playing very good and very consistent defense. They have a very productive quarterback in Caton Hauser, and they may be favored in 5 of their last 6 regular season games, with a mid-November visit to Greenville by Memphis, which still hasn't lost a game, being the only exception. The Pirates should be favored in all the others, including a big favorite against Tulsa on Thursday night. ECU against Tulsa might just run the Golden Hurricane out of the building. Remember, Tulsa did shock Oklahoma State in Stillwater earlier this season. They got longtime Cowboys head coach Mike Gundy fired in the process, but the Golden Hurricane has looked pretty poor in conference play so far, especially on offense. First-year Tulsa head coach Trey Lamb, who did a very good job here in our backyard during his 4-year tenure at Gardner-Webb of the FCS ranks. And then he quickly turned one solid season, Coach Lamb, at East Tennessee State into the Tulsa job in the American Conference. Good for him. He is a rising star in the coaching ranks. Guy's only 36 years old. But he just does not have great personnel at Tulsa this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. At quarterback, the Hurricane has used both sophomore Kirk Francis and redshirt freshman Baylor Hayes extensively without much success in either case. I would expect ECU's head coach Blake Harrell, who's a defensive guy, and his defensive coordinator Josh Aldridge, whose unit does lead the American Conference in scoring defense at only 15 points per game. I'd expect that ECU brain trust on the defensive side to just make life miserable for Tulsa's quarterbacks under those bright lights at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium on Thursday night.
DJ, as we wrap up this opening segment, are there other games that involve at least one team from our state that you think are worth more of a brief mention this week?
Yeah, reminder that at the FBS level, 4-3 NC State and 4-2 Wake Forest are both off this week. But Appalachian State and Charlotte have home games this Saturday afternoon under 2 totally different sets of circumstances. The 4-2 Mountaineers are a 10-point favorite as they host 3-3 Coastal Carolina, 3:30 game ESPN Plus. That's at Kid Brewer Stadium. The Chanticleers have looked absolutely horrific in all three of their losses this season, but they have won two of their last three games. Maybe the most interesting angle to watch for App State, which absolutely annihilated Georgia State last week, at one point leading 31-0 in Atlanta, is the continued development of redshirt sophomore quarterback J.J. Cole, the 6'7", 245-pound Iowa State quarterback transfer, who barely played in the Mountaineers' first four games under Coach Dow Loggins, but then started the last two, both victories, and looked much improved at Georgia State with 309 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. We'll see how that story unfolds against Coastal. Meanwhile, the 1-5 49ers are an 11-point underdog as they host 3-3 Temple, also 3:30 ESPN Plus on Saturday. The Owls appear to be a middle-of-the-pack team in the American Conference this season, whereas Charlotte, as expected and predicted, may have a hard time staying out of that league's cellar. The only other game worth mentioning this week involving a North Carolina team comes at the Division II level, and we're going to get to that one during our fun facts and shout-out segment a bit later in today's show.
That's what we call a tease, folks.
Aha!
Stay with us. More of This Week in College Football coming up in just a moment on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Hey, North Carolina, David Glenn here. If you want a real taste of Wilmington, NC, head to the Original Saltworks restaurant, owned and operated by local legend Bob Hubbard, who's also a great friend of the DG Show and the North Carolina Sports Network. The Original Saltworks has been serving hot, hearty Southern breakfasts and lunches since the 1970s. Whether grits, omelets, biscuits, burgers, hot dogs, or sweet tea, the Original Saltworks is a truly satisfying, bold North State experience. It's fast, it's fresh, it's full of flavor, and it's always served with a smile. Open for breakfast and lunch 7 days a week, always starting at 7 a.m. It's the Original Saltworks on Oleander Drive in Wilmington.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football, powered by our friends at NC Pork. Okay, DG, we're going to dive right into our national Week 8 look ahead, which is brought to you by our good friends at XL Moving and Storage, a family-owned Allied Van Lines partner here in North Carolina with more than 25 years of award-winning experience, local, long distance, or commercial. They do it all. Learn more and get a free quote at excelms.com. That's XL Moving and Storage. This week, DG, our national spotlight will focus on the biggest games in the ACC and the SEC, including the two most prominent ranked games that are on this week's schedule. We'll start in the Atlantic Coast Conference, where 4-1 Louisville visiting second-ranked Miami. The Hurricanes are 5-0. This is another Friday night game, 7 o'clock on ESPN. No real surprise here. Miami, a 13-point favorite at home.
Yeah, for the record, Mike Waddell and I will be watching the Louisville-Miami game on ESPN Friday night, and immediately after that, remember, it's the Carolina at Cal game we talked about earlier. We'll be at King Neptune Restaurant, the Pirate Bar next door, and Jimmy's Bar just a few steps away. Some combination of those three places. We're going to be having beverages, dinner, and late-night football. So we look forward to seeing all of our friends at the beach. This Louisville-Miami game is a fascinating matchup because both teams still believe they're good enough to end up in the ACC championship game. That's obvious for the Hurricanes, maybe not as obvious for the Cardinals. Both have fifth-year senior quarterbacks who are on the National Football League's radar. Both have extremely talented running backs and wide receivers. And I find this one fascinating because these two teams are number 1 and number 2 in the conference in total defense, with each side giving up much less than 300 yards per game. That's a really impressive defensive number for both the Cards and the Canes. The QBs are both new transfers from prominent programs. Carson Beck, of course, from Georgia, now playing for Miami. Miller Moss from Southern Cal, now playing for Louisville. Beck has been reliable. He's been smart. He's been consistent for the Hurricanes so far, although he has not made a lot of great throws down the field to stretch the defense. Miami's been too good in most games for defenses to even force the Canes to try to go that route. Miller Moss, on the other hand, has been very up and down, sometimes even panicky for Louisville, which is a major red flag as the Cardinals head to South Florida. The elite running backs are Miami's Mark Fletcher and maybe especially Louisville's Isaac Brown, who is one of the most spectacular talents in this entire league. The wide receivers include Miami's Malachi Toney and maybe especially Louisville's Chris Bell. The Cardinals may actually have the better high-end skill players, but the Canes have had much more reliable QB play from Beck and a more effective offensive line as well. The only ways for Louisville to challenge Miami in this one, in my eyes, would be for the Cardinals to create turnovers on defense and or for the Cards to get the best possible version of Miller Moss, who has not always looked comfortable or confident behind center in his first year running Jeff Brom's offense. But that guy, as we've talked about over a couple of years now, is a QB whisperer, so you never know when Moss is going to click with his coach, who's a former Louisville QB himself. None of that is going to be easy against a very nasty defense led by ends Ruben Bain Jr. and Akeem Mesidor, linebacker Wesley Bissanth, and a really talented secondary that has a few guys that are going to end up in the NFL.
All right, DG, to the SEC now, where fifth-ranked Ole Miss is 6-0. They are on the road at number 9 Georgia. The Bulldogs 5-1. This is the 3:30 window Saturday afternoon on ABC, and it's Georgia who's a 6-point home favorite between the Hedges in Athens.
Chris, tell me, would your brain work in such a way that you would recall that the two head coaches in this game were on the same staff under Nick Saban?
Yes, I knew that.
All right, because I'm a fairly smart guy. I follow this stuff closely, but I wasn't sure all those timelines matched up. And of course, I double checked just to be sure, but that's part of the fun of this matchup. When Alabama won the national title under head coach Nick Saban just 10 years ago, the 2015 season, the Crimson Tide's offensive coordinator was Lane Kiffin, and their defensive coordinator was Kirby Smart. I mean, what a trifecta there, right? Now, Kiffin is in his 6th season as the head coach at Ole Miss. Kirby Smart is in his 10th campaign as the head coach at Georgia. Kiffin and Smart have gone head-to-head only twice in their current jobs. 2 years ago, the Bulldogs absolutely hammered the Rebels 52-17 in Athens. Last year, the Rebels returned the favor with a 28-10 win in Oxford, after which the Ole Miss fans stormed the field. This matchup, of course, as Chris said, is back between the Hedges at Sanford Stadium in Georgia. UGA has been to the college football playoff 4 times and has won 2 national championships and 3 SEC titles under Kirby Smart. Ole Miss is still seeking its first college football playoff trip and has not won the SEC championship in my lifetime. Their last one was 1963. But the Rebels already have had 3 seasons of 10 or more victories under Lane Kiffin, and they, along with the Bulldogs, appear to be in pretty good position to make this year's 12-team playoff. Both of this year's new starting quarterbacks at these schools, Trinidad Chambliss of Ole Miss, Gunnar Stockton of Georgia, have been very reliable game managers for the most part, but neither has been a game breaker. In fact, the most intriguing matchup of this game may be the Ole Miss running back, Kawan Lacey, going against a very stout, as usual, Georgia defense. Lacey is a Missouri transfer, and he ranks 2nd in the SEC in all-purpose yards with 112 per game. But the Bulldogs, led by a probable first-round NFL pick in their junior linebacker C.J. Allen, are giving up only 17 points per game, and they're allowing less than 3 yards per rushing attempt. I like Georgia in this one. Georgia needs this one even more than the undefeated Rebels do, but I have a feeling they're both going to end up in a good place come December.
You mentioned Alabama a moment ago, DG. The Crimson Tide, they're number 6 in the polls this week. They're 5-1 so far on the season, and Alabama at home taking on number 11 Tennessee. The Volunteers checking at 5-1 overall. This is the primetime game on ABC, Saturday night, 7:30, and it's Alabama, a 9-point home favorite over Tennessee in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, this rivalry game was known for a long time as simply the 3rd Saturday in October, quote unquote, because for decades, that's when the matchup was played. And sure enough, this year, it has fallen back into that spot on the calendar once again. As you'd probably guess, Alabama has a significant advantage in this rivalry historically, and in recent decades, the Crimson Tide has really been putting it to the Volunteers. In the last 18 head-to-head matchups between Alabama and Tennessee, the Tide has won 16 of those 18 times. However, all of that dominance came under the legendary coach Nick Saban, one of the greatest coaches in football history. And for now, at least, it's not clear whether Alabama has any coaching advantage over Tennessee. Kalen DeBoer is just in his second year at Alabama after having those short but successful tenures at Fresno State and at Washington. Josh Heupel is in his fifth year at Tennessee after his short but successful tenure at UCF. Heupel has averaged exactly 10 wins per season over these last 3 years with the Volunteers. And impressively to me, he's 2-2 against the mighty Crimson Tide, with both of those victories, though, in Knoxville in 2022 against Saban and in 2024, just last year, against DeBoer. This game is back in Tuscaloosa, as Chris said, where Tennessee has not won since 2003, when the Volunteers head coach was Philip Fulmer and the Crimson Tide was in its first disastrous year under Mike Shula. This season, UT, remember with the App State transfer Joey Aguilar at quarterback, leads the SEC with 48 points per game offensively, but the Volunteers are last in the conference in scoring defense at around 30 points per game. That offers quite the opportunity for Alabama's quarterback Ty Simpson, a first-year starter who has become an NFL prospect after his slow start in that loss at FSU. Simpson's now completing 71% of his passes with 16 touchdown throws and only 1 interception, while averaging about 280 passing yards per game. Continuing today's theme, as we mentioned with some other games, it is very hard to bet against the home team in this one, and that means the Alabama Crimson Tide. Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas and Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football, powered by NC Pork. Diving into our coaches and quarterback segment, brought to you by our good friends at Lawson Insurance, who just last year celebrated their 50th anniversary of helping DG and many other North Carolina citizens and businesses with their personal and commercial insurance needs. You can reach out to the brothers Ken Miller and Michael Lawson. Like us, they're all huge sports fans. Give them a call at 919-846-2090 or search Lawson Insurance online. DG, we've been on the coaches topic for several weeks in a row now, and we'll, I'm sure, revisit that subject in the weeks to come. But let's pause that and now get a midseason update on the quarterbacks that we follow here in North Carolina and around the Atlantic Coast Conference. If you were handing out midseason All-ACC awards right now, who would be your first, second, and third team choice at quarterback? And beyond the ACC, who in North Carolina has impressed you the most at the most important position on the field?
Well, I will not elaborate on all of these guys, I promise. But in the ACC, the quarterback conversation this season starts with the following 7 guys. Haynes King of 6-0 Georgia Tech, Chandler Morris of 5-1 Virginia, Darian Mensah of 4-2 Duke, Carson Beck of 5-0 Miami, CJ Bailey of 4-3 NC State, Kevin Jennings of 4-2 SMU, and Tommy Castellanos of 3-3 now Florida State. There are 3 questions I ask myself when I cast my All-ACC ballot, because there are 7 or 8 good quarterbacks or better than good quarterbacks in the conference this year, and you want to be fair to everyone. So first, I ask, are you playing winning football? Winning is always infinitely more important than just putting up big numbers, period. No exceptions. Second, how difficult is your job description? Meaning, how much is your team leaning on you the quarterback to win games from that position versus leaning more on a team's defense or a team's running backs and offensive line. Third, of course, you take the pure statistics into account, throwing and running and sacks and all the rest, especially in my eyes, the stats compiled in a team's closest games and those against a team's highest caliber opponents. Makes sense, right? With all of that in mind, my top three guys right now are Haynes King, Chandler Morris, and Darian Mensah, with apologies to the others I mentioned because they have all, in their own ways, done some really impressive things as well. But Georgia Tech is 6-0 and ranked number 12 nationally right now, primarily because of Haynes King. He's a 24-year-old sixth-year senior who's now in his third season as the team's starter for Coach Brent Key, after spending his first 3 years at Texas A&M and even getting his college diploma while executing those 3 years with the Aggies. The Yellow Jackets are not great on defense this season, and they lean very heavily on King to manage the clock, make adjustments at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap and otherwise, keep the defense off balance, make smart decisions, get lots of first downs with his running ability, and then throw the ball just well enough in a given game to get the victory. In all three of Tech's closest games this season, Colorado, Clemson, and Wake Forest, King rushed for more than 100 yards from the QB position while also completing about 2/3 of his passes. His average, actually, of 88 rushing yards per game right now is third in the entire ACC, behind only two big-time running backs, Hollywood Smothers at NC State, Damon Claiborne of Wake Forest, two guys we know well here in the bold North State. The best words to describe King are tough and winner, and this is his best season yet. Similarly, at 5-1 Virginia, Chandler Morris is by far the number one reason the Cavaliers are nationally ranked and, yes, I'm going to say it out loud, in contention for a trip to the ACC title game. UVA ranks 8th nationally in scoring offense at 43 points per game, and Morris, another sixth-year senior quarterback, is completing about 70% of his passes with 11 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions so far. During Coach Tony Elliott's first 3 seasons in Charlottesville, poor QB play often ranked among the biggest reasons the Wahoos never gained any traction. This year, Morris, a North Texas transfer who, by the way, UNC general manager Mike Lombardi was not interested in the transfer portal because Lombardi did not view Morris as a significant NFL prospect. This Morris guy may be nevertheless the best dual threat QB combination in the entire ACC, as it turns out. Morris throws much better than even Haynes King or Tommy Castellanos or the other run-first quarterbacks, yet Morris runs much better than Darian Mensah or Carson Beck or C.J. Bailey or the ACC's other throw-first QBs, if you will. Morris also is a great leader and an emotional spark plug for the Wahoos, which is exactly what Elliott and his embattled staff needed this season in Charlottesville. Closer to home, Darian Mensah drew a lot of headlines in the offseason when he became the first Duke football player ever to sign a multi-million-dollar deal to play for the Blue Devils, and he has definitely lived up to the hype and his paycheck very quickly. Whereas King and Morris are in their final year of eligibility, Darian Mensah is only a redshirt sophomore, but he plays with the poise, the wisdom, the leadership of a much older and more experienced player. A transfer from Tulane, of course, Mensah currently ranks number 3 in the nation with 306 passing yards per game, and his combination of 15 touchdown passes against only 2 interceptions is by far the best ratio in the ACC in that regard. He's also completing about 70% of his passes, and he seems to get better with each passing week. The fans at Wallace Wade Stadium on Saturday afternoon may be in for a huge treat with Haynes King leading the Yellow Jackets and Darian Mensah leading the Blue Devils. And lastly, beyond the ACC, very quickly, here in North Carolina, the 2 quarterbacks who have stood out to me the most in a good way are guys we've talked about several times on this show this season. East Carolina's veteran Caton Hauser and Western Carolina's new starter Teron Dickens. Hauser is 15th nationally with close to 300 passing yards per game. And he actually has a big chance to upgrade those numbers this week on national TV against a mediocre Tulsa team in that ESPN Thursday night slot. We look forward to being there for that one with our tailgate tour. We'll talk more about Teron Dickens, the sensational spark plug for the Catamounts of the FCS ranks, during our upcoming shoutouts segment on today's show. Struggling with clutter, calendar chaos, or nonstop notifications? Let Emily Parks at OrganizeForSuccess.com help you get organized and take control of your time. She's a North Carolina-based productivity pro who empowers busy people like you to work smarter and stress less. Visit OrganizeForSuccess.com and schedule your free discovery session today.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football, powered by NC Pork. As DG has alluded to already, we like to offer some quick mentions about those making positive headlines on the gridiron, especially in the ACC or here across the bold North State. So with that thought in mind, we bring you our weekly fun facts and shout-outs brought to you by our good friends at Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach. Jimmy's has a full bar, nightly drink specials, and live music 365 days a year. And right next door, King Neptune has become one of the best restaurants in the entire greater Wilmington area. You can keep up with Jimmy's on Facebook and Instagram at Jimmy's Wrightsville Beach and learn more about King Neptune Restaurant at neptuneswb.com. Okay, DG, time for you to bring it on. What's left in your notebook as we head into this week?
Fun fact, even though we are only roughly halfway through the 2025 regular season, we already know that this year's ACC football champion almost certainly will be either a school that has never won that title or a school that has not won that title in a long time. Since 2010, remember, only 3 programs have won the ACC football championship game. Clemson 9 times, Florida State 4 times, and Pitt 1 time. In case you've forgotten, as many do, the Panthers won under their current head coach, Pat Narduzzi, back in 2021 during their 11-3 season when Kenny Pickett was their quarterback, Jordan Addison was their star wide receiver, Kalijah Cansey was their elite defensive tackle, and Servachia Dennis was their stud linebacker. All 4 of those guys, among others from that outstanding Pitt team, are still playing in the National Football League. Right now, the top ACC contenders are 5-0 Miami. The Hurricanes, despite being ACC members for more than 2 decades at this point, have never won an ACC football title. Contender, 6-0 Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets did win in 2009, which is a little more recent, but that championship was later vacated by the NCAA. And prior to that, the Jackets' most recent ACC title came in 1998. So again, we're going back to the previous century. Contender Duke. Devils have not won the ACC title since Steve Spurrier, the legendary coach, helped them tie Virginia in the regular season standings way back in 1989, long before the ACC championship game was created so there could still be ties for the conference title. Virginia is also a contender. Guess what? Cavs haven't won the ACC title since legendary coach George Welsh helped them tie Florida State in 1995. For the record, SMU and Louisville are still alive in this year's race for the ACC championship. A lot of football still to be played. Neither the Mustangs nor the Cardinals have ever won the ACC football title either.
For our veterans, the end of their service is just the beginning. It may come with new careers and new chaos. There might be late nights, school drops, and even haircuts. That's where we come in, providing more than $1 million a year in career-building scholarship funds and discounts on every haircut for our veterans. Just trying to do our part to make their lives a little easier. Sport Clips Haircuts, supporting veterans everywhere.
Okay, on to this week's shout-outs. Shout out to Indiana head football coach Kurt Cignetti, who previously served, remember, as Chuck Amato's quarterbacks coach and recruiting coordinator at NC State, and later as the head coach, also here in our backyard, at Elon University, which became a top 25 FCS program on Cignetti's watch in 2017 and 2018. Cignetti then went from Elon to James Madison, where his average record over 5 seasons there was 10-2. He led the Dukes to 3 straight trips to the FCS playoff semifinals, including 1 national title game, and then through a successful transition to the FBS ranks as a member of the Sun Belt Conference before being hired to take over at Indiana in the Big Ten. At this point, what Cignetti has done over the last season and a half with the Hoosiers has to rank among the most amazing stories in recent college football history. And I bring it up this week specifically in part because last Saturday, his Indiana team went to number 3 Oregon and beat the previously undefeated Ducks on their home field 30-20. Remember, a couple weeks before, the Hoosiers beat number 9 Illinois by a 63-10 margin. Those are huge eye-openers, and they're among the many reasons that Curt Cignetti, along with Penn State alum Matt Rule, now the head coach at Nebraska, are prominent targets in this early stage of Penn State's ongoing coaching search. Indiana is now 6-0 and number 3 in the national polls, behind only Ohio State and Miami. If you notice, most of the teams in the national top 10 right now, the Buckeyes, the Hurricanes, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, etc., they are multi-time national championship programs, and they are long-term college football superpowers, or they're incredibly well-funded programs such as top 10 Texas A&M, which now has an overall athletics budget of about $250 million a year and a football-specific budget of about $100 million a year, or top 10 Oregon, where Phil Knight's Nike money also has built an amazing financial foundation. Indiana, while a 5-time national champion in men's basketball, has rarely been nationally relevant in football during my lifetime. In fact, the Hoosiers had finished in the top 25 only once in 35 years when Cignetti took that job, and they rarely have had even a winning record in their Big Ten games. Cignetti obviously had an amazing immediate impact in Bloomington last year when the Hoosiers went 11-2, made the college football playoff, and finished number 10 in the national polls. That marked only the 3rd time in more than 100 years of college football that IU had a top 10 finish on the gridiron. Now Cignetti has them in position to do all of that for the 2nd year in a row, which would be just a mind-boggling accomplishment, especially at that school. Shout out back here in ACC country to first-year Wake Forest head coach Jake Dickert and his defensive coordinator Scotty Hazelton, as the Demon Deacons are off to a 4-2 start, largely because of their consistently strong performances on the defensive side of the ball. Listen to these numbers. Among the 136 FBS programs, Wake ranks only 99th on offense and 101st on special teams in ESPN's efficiency rankings, but the Deacons are 22nd on defense in those same numbers. Wake has absolutely shut down its 3 lesser opponents so far, holding Kennesaw State to 9 points, Western Carolina to 10, Oregon State to 14. In the Deacs' 3 ACC games so far, their defense allowed only 27 points to NC State. One other touchdown was by the Wolfpack defense. Wake's defense allowed only 23 points in regulation to Georgia Tech and allowed only 23 points in a win over Virginia Tech. Wake currently ranks 3rd in the ACC in scoring defense at only 20 points per game, behind only Miami and Clemson, 2 teams that are overflowing with NFL caliber talent on that side of the ball. The defensive leaders for Wake have included 6th-year senior safety Nick Anderson, redshirt sophomore nickelback Devon Patterson, 5th-year senior linebacker Dylan Hazen, who's now a 3-year starter for the Demon Deacons, and 5th-year senior edge rusher Langston Hardy, who's a transfer from UConn. Jake Dickert's coaching background is on the defensive side of the ball. He was the defensive coordinator on some very successful Wyoming teams before being hired as the DC at Washington State, where, of course, he later got promoted to head coach. Dickert and Scotty Hazelton, again, that's Wake's current defensive coordinator, actually worked together on the defensive staff at Wyoming back in 2017 when the Cowboys had a stunning 38 takeaways in a single season, which is one of the highest numbers for any FBS team over the last couple of decades. This year's Wake team has only 6 takeaways so far, but it has done a brilliant job of limiting opponents' explosion plays and frequently forcing foes into field goal attempts. Shout out at the FCS level to fifth-year Western Carolina head coach Kerwin Bell and the Catamounts' sensational quarterback Teron Dickens. We mentioned Dickens as a rising star in Cullowhee on our show back in August, then again last week after he had set the all-time NCAA record at any level by completing his first 46 passes in a row during the Catamounts' comeback victory at Wofford. Without Teron Dickens, this year's Western Carolina team lost its first 3 games. With Teron Dickens, a 5'11", 180-pound redshirt sophomore quarterback from Miami, the Catamounts have now won 4 in a row, including last Saturday's 52-7 pasting of Furman, in which Dickens connected on 17 of 24 passes for 220 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions, while also running 7 times for 48 yards. Furman, by the way, is a program that has won a record 15 Southern Conference football championships, far more than any other school. Western Carolina, meanwhile, has never won the SoCon football title, despite being a member of that league since 1976. Right now, the only undefeated teams in SoCon play, meaning conference games, are Western Carolina and Mercer, and they will face each other this season in Cullowhee on November 8th. There's still a long way to go, obviously, and Western still has 4 other conference games left to play too. But after decades where the Catamounts were only rarely in the conversation for Southern Conference honors or for a trip to the FCS playoffs, it is just a lot of fun to see them, thanks to Coach Kerwin Bell and now thanks to Teron Dickens, firmly in the mix for both of those things at this point, while also putting up the sorts of offensive numbers that make maybe an out-of-the-way trip for many to Whitmire Stadium in Cullowhee very worthwhile. Last but not least, shout-outs at the Division II level to the coaches and players at Fayetteville State, Johnson C. Smith, and UNC Pembroke, who have all put themselves in position to challenge for a conference championship and a trip to the D2 playoffs. Under 10th-year head coach Richard Hayes Jr., who led his program to the CIAA title in 2022, Fayetteville State is off to a perfect 4-0 start this season in conference play, with dominating victories by scores of 51-8, 34-14, 38-10, and 38-14. The Broncos are off this week, but they will have huge home games in November against in-state league rivals Johnson C. Smith and Winston-Salem State. Speaking of J.C. Smith, under their fourth-year head coach Maurice Flowers, the Golden Bulls are 5-1 and back in the national top 25, 1 year after posting one of the best seasons in program history. The CIAA championship game this year will be in Durham, remember, at Durham County Stadium, and the Bulls join Virginia Union and Fayetteville State, who are currently tied for first place in that league, as the leading contenders for those 2 title game slots. Finally, UNC Pembroke, led by third-year head coach Mark Hall, is now also in the D2 national rankings at number 20 after a fantastic 6-1 start. This Saturday, the Braves visit the only other team that is undefeated in the Conference Carolinas, the North Greenville Trailblazers. The winner of that one will have the inside track for the league championship and that league's automatic D2 playoff bid. I'm David Glenn, and those are my fun facts and shout-outs as we head into college football's Week 8 right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Thank you, DG, and thank you to NC Pork for being the founding partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. A quick reminder that DG and his staff are posting daily articles at our fast-growing website, ncsportsnetwork.com, which also has direct links on its homepage to this YouTube channel, which now ranks in the top 2% in the world with more than 44,000 subscribers, and the wide variety of places you can get on-demand audio and podcasts of our show, The David Glenn Show, and all of the other offerings. Meanwhile, our never-ending statewide travels will continue this week with 3 stops. On Thursday, we'll be in Greenville with our Old North State Tailgate Tour and Traveling Sports Circus in the hours leading up to East Carolina's Thursday night football matchup against Tulsa on ESPN. Then on Friday, we'll be in Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach for our annual football weekend at the beach. We'll be interviewing folks at Jimmy's Bar on Friday afternoon, having dinner next door at King Neptune on Friday night, then watching ESPN's 2 Friday night football games, Louisville, Miami, and then North Carolina, Cal, the last game at 10:30 p.m. start. We're going to watch that either at Jimmy's Bar, which as always has a band on Friday night, or a few steps away in the Pirate Bar inside King Neptune, where there are plenty of big screen TVs. Then finally on Saturday, our friend Mike Waddell will be in Little Washington, North Carolina for the Smoke on the Water Festival as part of our season-long Whole Hog Barbecue series. In each case, we hope to see all of you out and about this weekend. For DG, I'm Chris Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us for This Week in College Football, right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
This has been Bold North State Football Daily, an exclusive presentation of the North Carolina Sports Network. Make sure you follow us on social media at the NC Sportsnet, and check out our website that is wall-to-wall coverage of North Carolina sports at ncsportsnetwork.com. Our foundational partner is the North Carolina Pork Council, raising the bacon, raising the bar. Telling the stories of the bold North State, this is the North Carolina Sports Network.